So recently, Jack Harlow has been in the news because he came out with a new album. And honestly, I am not a Jack Harlow fan. He has not been on my radar since Churchill Down came out. And that was probably like 2 or 3 years ago. So somebody else had to tell me all of the stuff that was going on with his album. And it also turns out that there's been quite a bit of controversy around this rollout. He had an interview with the New York Times podcast to talk about his fourth studio album, Monica. And the conversation was supposed to be about his artistic evolution over time and how he's trying to shift away from rap and start to move towards R&B and neo soul. And in that interview, it also came up that a lot of his colleagues, or the white rappers like Post Malone and MGK, had gone down a different route. So for example, Post Malone went towards country and MGK is going towards this pop punk type of sound. And this is something I've also been noticing over the past 2 years. There's this pattern where the white artists who built their careers in hip hop are starting to move towards a more traditionally white genre now that the cultural and political climate is starting to change. So then the host basically asks him, why didn't you do that as well? And that's when he said the thing that's been so controversial. He said, I got blacker.
I'm saying you didn't retreat into a whiter genre. In fact, you arguably went deeper into
I got blacker.
Black music.
Yeah.
deeper into blackness.
Yeah.
So
that was his explanation behind the creative journey of this album. And to be fair, this wasn't all that he said. He also said, I love black music. I love the sound of black music. And of course, I am hyper aware of the politics of today.
I think I love black music. I love the sound of black
who
music.
among us?
Yeah, I
It's
love the sound of black music.
Yeah.
And of course, I'm hyper aware of the politics of today, that safer landing spot that a lot of my white contemporaries have found. And of course, it appealed to me to do something that I felt like at a time when there's plenty of people expecting me to take some of the routes y'all are taking.
Yep.
To take the route that not only might not be expected, but is also the one I genuinely want to take.
And the intention could have been to show that he's being deliberate about his career choice, but he was also aware of the fact that saying I got blacker might come off bad. So he tried to soften it with the whole I love black music statement. But the more that I think about what he said, the worse that it actually seems. And you can't always get away with being ignorant, because at a certain point you should just know better, especially if you claim to be up with the black community. And he's not just saying that he loves black music, he's saying that he looked at all the options that were in front of him and he chose black culture intentionally as if it's an option in a buffet. And I think that's almost worse than if he just said the ignorant statement and left it at that. And who knows, maybe he didn't mean any harm. He could have thought it would come off as a compliment or like he was giving credit where credit was due. But I think that unawareness is almost exactly the problem and what people are so angry with. And on top of all that, this wasn't even the first time that he's been in this sort of situation. There was a moment which people dug up the second this all started, where he didn't recognize a Brandy song during an interview with Ebro. And this moment was significant because it exposed that gap between claiming a culture and actually being of that culture.
Can I give him a hint? All right, how about I go this way? She had a TV show. She started a TV show.
Brother had an amazing sex tape.
Who's Ray J's sister?
Brandy is definitely not an unheard of artist. She is one of the most celebrated R&B vocalists of her generation. And some people might even say that she is the pillar of that genre. And this is the same genre that he says shaped him to the point that he got blacker. So not knowing her music seems very telling. And TDE President Punch also said on X, got blacker is wild. How exactly does one get blacker? And as the internet does, they started to clown him and give him these random nicknames like Ghostface Vanilla, Chaka Clan, Chance the Cracker, which is funny, but also the humor is the black community doing what it does when it can't really do much else. And another response that I thought was like perfect. They said, people really think we are costumes to be worn. And I think that pretty much sums up everything that I want to talk about today. And this conversation isn't just about Jack Harlow having a bad interview day and kind of slipping up. He and so many other artists and people in high places do this sort of thing. It's a super old pattern that has only gotten bigger and more profitable over time. And I want to get into all of that. What happens when a culture starts to become a commodity? And more importantly, who gets to walk away when it stops being as useful to them? What's up, YouTube? I'm Tiny C. And if you are returning, thank you so much for coming back. And if you are new here, I hope you like like it, feel free to peruse, look at my other videos. There's tons of stuff to watch. With this video today, I hope you guys really like it. I did so much research. So much work went into the script writing. Sometimes these sorts of topics can be difficult for me because I want to like do it justice and say it perfectly. So hopefully you guys like this video. And if I missed anything, put it in the comments. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and welcome to my digital garden. But before we get into it, a word from today's sponsor, NordVPN. When I'm doing research for all of my videos, I'm usually clicking through a lot of links, a lot of articles, forums, fan accounts, threads. That could be slightly sketchy, and the internet is not always so safe to be moving through so carelessly, even for research purposes. NordVPN's Threat Protection Pro actively blocks malicious sites and phishing links before they can do anything to your device. And you don't even need to be connected to a VPN server for it to work. It's just running in the background and it's doing its job. And if you're ever on public Wi-Fi at a cafe, an airport, a hotel doing work or editing like me, you should be using a VPN. Free networks are one of the easiest ways for someone to intercept your password and your data. NordVPN encrypts your entire connection with one click, and NordVPN's dark web monitor is also such a lifesaver as a content creator. I have accounts on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, email, and baking, and if one of those passwords leaks, that would be pretty bad. The dark web monitor continuously scans hacker forms and alerts me immediately if my credentials show up in a breach. So the good thing is that you'll find out before someone drains your bank account, not after. Go to nordvpn.com/tinysey and use code tinysey to get a 2-year plan plus 4 extra months free. It is completely risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee, no questions asked. Thank you so much to our sponsor, NordVPN. So if you've been watching my channel for a while, first of all, thank you, but you also know that I talk about something called the cannibalization of culture. And this is that process where something gets super popular and then everyone starts to take part, and then slowly but surely it gets repackaged and people forget about where it actually came from to begin with. And I always bring up matcha because I think it's such a good example, but trust and believe there are so many more examples. So feel free to watch that video for more context. We're going to be circling that idea a lot throughout this video because it's behind a lot of what I want to discuss today. And this time around, I want to apply it a little bit more specifically because when it comes to Black culture in the entertainment industry, this is more than just a pattern. It's also a business model that makes people billions of dollars. Black culture has probably been one of the most mined and least credited cultures in the history of American entertainment. And I'm sure this is not a new observation for a lot of you guys. Scholars, artists, and activists have been talking about this for decades. There's a quote from the Chicago Defender after Elvis died, and they pretty much were writing about how Chuck Berry is the king of rock. Presley was merely a prince who profited from the royal talent of a sovereign ruler. And what makes Elvis such a complicated case study is that he wasn't even denying it. He himself said, "Nobody can sing that kind of music like colored people. Let's face it, I can't sing like Fats Domino can." He knew he was a mediocre version of the original sound, and he verbally gave them credit, but the industry still made him the millionaire while the people he was crediting struggled to see a fraction of those returns. And this all goes even deeper than Elvis. Most people don't know that rock and roll itself was pioneered by a queer Black woman named Sister Rosetta Tharpe decades before Elvis was even on anybody's radar. Her gospel boogie style directly influenced Little Richard, Chuck Berry, and Elvis. So essentially, she's the root of a genre that made other people very famous, wealthy, and rise to that legendary status. And most people probably couldn't tell you her name if their life depended on it. And that's the thing about all of this. The erasure doesn't happen all at once. It happens very gradually over time until the origin is so far removed from the product that people stop thinking to even ask where it came from in the first place. But for this conversation, I'm more interested in what that looks like in the industry right now. And we have so many case studies to choose from. And nowadays it isn't always as obvious as it used to be. It doesn't always look like straight up theft. Sometimes it can look like admiration or collaboration. Sometimes it's simply a record deal or a group member or even a press tour. And sometimes it straight up looks like a costume. Okay, let's talk about Ariana Grande and more specifically about her many different career arcs because I think it's one of the many case studies we can use to understand how this whole thing actually works. A lot of the choices that Ariana Grande made as she became the pop star that we know today borrowed from Black culture. So her vocal runs, her production choices, her aesthetics in certain eras, the slang that she uses. I mean, she even had the nickname Blackiana. Those of us that know.
I'm like, bitch, that's my cookie, that's my juice, okay?
And a lot of those choices were rooted in R&B and Black womanhood and in a particular type of Black femininity that clearly carries a lot of cultural currency. And it was a choice that obviously worked for her. It got her into rooms. It made her feel a lot more current and credible because the market is obviously very tough to get into. And if you know her lore, she tried a couple times before she finally succeeded with her song The Way featuring Mac Miller. And that was an R&B song with a rap feature. The Black cultural aesthetic wasn't an accident in her success. It was a deliberate choice that made her career blow up. This all kind of brings us back to Jack Harlow saying that he got Blacker. He's saying the quiet part out loud because some artists lean into Black aesthetics specifically because of what it grants them. Usually it's credibility or edge, and it's that feeling that you're not just making a sanitized pop for an average white American audience. You're not like a Taylor Swift. In that sense, Black culture can be the key to differentiating yourself in a very crowded market. And the scholar Bell Hooks wrote about this in 1992 in the essay called Eating the Other. She described how within commodity culture, ethnicity functions as spice. It's seasoning that livens up what she called the dull dish of mainstream culture. You add it for flavor, you add it for intensity, for the sense that something real or vital is actually happening. And I think it's worth reading that essay completely because she saw this whole phenomenon decades before the internet made it move as quick as it does nowadays. Lauren Michelle Jackson, a Northwestern professor who wrote White Negroes When Cornrows Were in Vogue in 2019, adds on to this idea even more. She argues that what the dominant culture has perfected is the art of developing, and in her words, Black aesthetics without Black people. So you take the sound, the look, and the energy, and then slowly but surely you start to detach it from the actual human beings that it came from. And it's a very integral part of this whole phenomenon. So now that we understand that concept a little bit more, let's get back to Ariana, but specifically the Wicked press tour. This was a major Hollywood film. It was a prestige project that a lot of actors would die to work on. And it's also the kind of film that the creators want to reach the absolute widest audience as possible. So when the Wicked press tour actually started to roll out, Ariana was no longer giving Blackiana. Gone was her R&B aesthetic that she had built her brand on. The tan skin was gone, the dark hair was gone, that racially ambiguous look. She was wearing a lot of soft pastels and she dyed her hair blonde and it was giving very like old school Hollywood glamour, and she became a lot more palatable for the masses. So if she was trying to send a signal for something, people picked up what she was putting down almost immediately. But which version of herself was more authentic, I don't think we'll ever really know, but this was a version that got to stand next to a Broadway legacy and be taken seriously by people who probably hadn't really been paying attention to her before. So to put it plainly, the Black aesthetic may have gotten her into the door, but for the Wicked press tour, it wasn't really needed. So in the end, she decided to toss it. And as I was writing this section, I kept thinking about Kendrick Lamar as a good parallel. So just stick with me. It sounds a bit random, but right now, Kendrick is probably one of the most critically acclaimed rappers alive right now. He is a Pulitzer Prize winner. He just had the most iconic beef victory in hip hop history. He performed at the Super Bowl and he just has a huge cultural footprint right now, especially in the Black community. All that to say, Kendrick probably couldn't do what Ariana did because the way he speaks, his swag, his fashion, the things that make him Kendrick, they're obviously not a costume that he's just putting on. They've been pretty consistent throughout his whole career. And he probably, and I'm saying probably because obviously anything's possible, but he probably couldn't easily pivot into a more neutral or palatable for the masses aesthetic for a similar type of prestigious Hollywood moment. And you're probably asking, well, why can't Kendrick do that? And I think it's because Black artists, especially in predominantly white spaces, whether that's a Hollywood press room, a major label boardroom, a mainstream award show, they're rarely just seen as artists. They come into the room representing something, and it's usually their culture or a demographic or even a political position. And that's whether they ask for that pressure or not. So Kendrick's blackness is never going to be secondary or in the background. It's always going to be present with him in the room. And that doesn't mean it has to hold him back. But at this point in time, it's not something that people in these high places just ignore. But with Ariana Grande, her whiteness can disappear since it's seen as the default. So she can be Blackiana one day, and then she could go into this major boardroom and present as white and, become more palatable or neutral, even though she was pretending to be edgy before. And that really is the structural difference that we see between a Black artist like Kendrick and, a white artist like Ariana. So non-Black artists borrow Black culture, they use it, and then they could choose to set it down as they please. But Black artists usually aren't given the same amount of privilege. And we often see that non-Black people profit more from Black culture than Black people actually do. And they get to use the sound and the aesthetics, but carry less of that baggage of actually being Black. The industry's honestly structured things so that a sanitized non-Black version of Blackness is often more profitable for them than the real thing. So it's easier to sell to an industry that's always been more comfortable with Blackness as an aesthetic rather than the reality of being Black. And we see it on TikTok constantly. A non-Black person will do a dance that originated, with the Black community, and people will be so easily impressed. And the bar is just so much lower. And it's like, oh, because you were white and you did this dance move somewhat decently, get it, white chocolate. Like, don't hurt him, white chocolate. But a Black person can do the same moves and it's just kind of like status quo. Like, you did as good as we expected you to do, so it's not as impressive. The standards are just not the same, and that imbalance has a real consequence for the real Black artists that are competing in these same spaces. And nowhere is that more visible than in K-pop, which takes this whole dynamic and cranks it up to the nth degree. I've been a K-pop fan since high school, and some of the first video essays that I ever made were about the racism that's inside of the K-pop industry. So I have a lot of love for the genre, but I also have a lot of criticism for them. It's hard to pretend like, there aren't a lot of problems that exist. K-pop as a genre was built on Black culture at a foundational level. The CEO of Big Hit Entertainment, BTS's label, said so themselves, that Black music is the base. And that's not a critic saying that. Again, that's a CEO in the industry.
저희가 연습생 때는 맨날 힙합을 연습을 시켰어요. 원래 블랙 뮤직에 기반을 두는 회사긴 했어서. 그래서 저희도 그런 힙합 R&B들 위주로 연습하고 막 그렇게 리듬 타는 것도 막 보고 따라하라 그러고 이랬어요.
리듬 어떻게 따라했는데?
제스처랑 이런 걸음걸이나 이런 거
리듬 좀 이런 거 좀 따라해라.
따라해라. 그렇게 했었는데
근데 그거 진짜 도움 될 것 같아.
Hip-hop, R&B, the choreography, the fashion, the entire landscape that K-pop operates in, a lot of it can be traced back to Black creative tradition. And unlike with some of the other examples I talked about today, this wasn't a gradual process. The K-pop industry was built deliberately to work this way from the start. It was designed to look at what's working in the global market, particularly in America, and repackage it for a primarily Asian market. So for example, when Tyla's song Water got super popular, you started to see the Korean girl groups start to incorporate that sound as well as the African dance moves. Matter of fact, Kiss of Life had the song Sticky, which did both of those things. So very much look that up. It's like exactly what I'm talking about. And people who have studied K-pop's model described it as one where the artists are appropriating and articulating global cultural forms to create something that can sell anywhere. So Black American music and culture is a primary global cultural form that is being absorbed, and they intentionally created their business model to work in this fashion. And like with all the other borrowers that we've been discussing today, they take the culture and then they don't really address where the inspiration comes from. And the thing with K-pop is that they don't just appropriate for profit. They appropriate, but then they also will be racist towards Black people. And people like to claim that they don't know any better, but at some point, like I said, ignorance stops being a valid excuse, especially when they're actively trying to enter into the American market. There are so many documented incidents like Mamamoo, they performed in blackface. Wendy from Red Velvet mimicked a stereotype Black woman on a national variety show as kind of a party trick. And BTS's leader, RM, used to do impressions of Black English in interviews when the host would ask him to. And he actually ended up apologizing for it and called it further than a mistake. It was wrong. And it's a good thing that he apologized, but the apology apology came so much later than the incident, right? And that's also conveniently around the time that BTS started breaking out into the American market. In Korea, they don't really care about these things, so he didn't have to be accountable. But as soon as it started messing with their revenue in the West, now he has to put out a statement. And then there was a Kiss of Life incident from 2024, which I think is probably the most incriminating incident in this era of K-pop. The group had a birthday live stream with an old school hip hop theme, and the members were, wearing cornrows, using AAVE, calling each other names like Lil Taco Bell, and performing a very stereotypical version of Black hip hop culture for their audience's entertainment. And a lot of people felt like they were making a mockery of the culture. I mean, even calling the live stream old school hip hop, I don't know. I feel like they should have known better because they have American members in their group. But like, I swear, all sense goes out the door. They also eventually apologized when the issue got big and they deleted the video, but they also lost around 200,000 Instagram followers because of all of the controversy around it. And as someone that's been talking about these issues since like 8 years ago, I'm glad fans are a lot quicker to speak out when these sort of things happen, because I don't even think Kiss of Life is in the American market like that, but like, we had enough influence to get them to take accountability. And this really is a contradiction at the heart of a lot of K-pop's relationship to Black culture. They obviously need it because they profit from it and they build their entire commercial identity around it. But then they simultaneously treat Black people as an afterthought. K-pop companies will respond to dating rumors literally in a blink of an eye, but let it be about something racist that they did, and it's radio silence. They don't say anything because they know that it won't lose them any money, or at least that's how it's been thus far. And I'm sure you all know how popular K-pop has been becoming in the past few years. They have pretty much expanded to America. HYBE, the same company that created BTS, came to America with a new project called Cat's Eye. And it's not exactly K-pop, and they made sure to be clear about that. Cat's Eye is a global girl group that's based in LA, and they sing in English. But the group was built using that same sort of K-pop model. So the way that they trained and the whole industrial approach to manufacturing a girl group, that's what they use. And HYBE's chairman said that his goal was to take the K out of K-pop and make it just pop for more global success. And it's pretty much been working. But as they were building this group, they made sure to personally scout and cast a Black girl. And her name is Manon Bannerman, and she's apparently the first Black artist ever to be signed under HYBE. So essentially the first time that they ever include a Black person is because they're trying to sell to a Western audience. So at least they know what we like. And in February 2026, HYBE and Geffen announced that Manon would be going on a temporary hiatus for, quote, health and well-being reasons. Their fans are called the Icons, and they were not having it. And I mean, I have never seen fans support somebody so hard since Beyonce. Like, they love Manon down. And everyone was instantly so suspicious after the announcement came out. And I think it's pretty much because shortly after the announcement, Manon liked a Instagram post by a creator named Simply Simone that discussed racism and the unfair treatment experienced by Black female members of girl groups. She also posted on Weverse saying, sometimes things unfold in ways we don't fully control. Honestly, even way before the hiatus was announced, fans have been suspicious about how the company treats Manon. And scrolling through TikTok and seeing all of the evidence that the fans are finding, like, the evidence is pretty damning for the company. They're finding things like her being hidden in choreography, or, not being present for certain promotional activity, or not being posted on Instagram the same as the other girls. Like, there is so much evidence. They got me convinced. I have the tin hat on, and I believe that something is happening to Manon. They came up with the hashtag justice for Manon and boycott for Manon, and this has been circulating on social media, and fans are asking for more transparency from HYBE and Geffen. And anytime their official TikTok posts the other members, the comments are just full of things about Manon. And I'm sure she's feeling the love, because if I was her, I would be. Now, to be fair, we don't know the full story, and she could actually just be on hiatus, and the fans could be reading too much into it. The allegations are still unverified. They haven't been answered. But what we do know is that this pattern that fans are pointing out are not new. This has happened before. Specifically, this has happened with Normani. And if you don't know who she is the sole Black member of Fifth Harmony. And they were one of the biggest American girl groups of the 2010s. Another group whose sound, aesthetic, and choreography heavily leaned on Black culture. And I believe that Normani deserved to be there because she was arguably the most talented performer in her group. She danced better. She stood out more. Sorry, not sorry. She had had the most stage presence. So I feel like she definitely earned her spot in the group. Fifth Harmony has openly cited Whitney Houston, Mariah Carey, and R&B music as their biggest influence. And I think it's fair to say that having Normani in the group gave them a lot of credibility in that particular space. But credibility and care are two different things, and she was useful to the group's identity, but I'm not so sure they actually valued her as a member. In a Billboard interview, she talked about being the only member forced to sing background vocals and how she was brought to tears in studio sessions by the way that she was treated. And she said she would ask herself, is it because I'm Black or am I just not talented? Which is so sad and crazy to hear. But that's also a question that Black people in predominantly non-Black professional spaces know way too well, because there's this doubt that the industry will plant in you. You start to wonder whether you're actually welcome in the room or if they just need to act like you're welcomed for the sake of making money or looking like they're diverse. Normani was also targeted by racist trolls online with like really horrible images, and it took days for her group members to say anything about it. And when they finally did say something, it was just a very vague post where they said love only. And their fans made sure to point out how half-assed the response was given everything that she was going through. And that's the thing, they love Black culture, they love to use Black culture, but when a Black person is actually being harmed, it's crickets. And a lot of the times Black people in these sorts of groups are already trying to navigate the stigma of being seen as the diversity hire, which makes no sense because they're working in an industry that wouldn't even exist without all of the Black creative labor that's gone into it. So when the fans are looking at Manon's situation, you know, being hidden in the choreography or missing from promotional materials or not posted on Instagram, they start to think of Normani and Leanne from Little Mix and all the other Black women that have been, you know, the diverse one in a group, because they start to think of that pattern of, did they actually want that Black girl in the group, or did they just use her for the diversity she brings or so that they can look more inclusive? So I don't think the fans are being paranoid because we've seen this movie before. I also don't think that Black culture being everywhere is the problem because, you know, get into it. We love that for Black culture. I think the fact that hip hop is one of the most consumed music genres on the planet, and that AAVE shapes how, you know, Gen Z pretty much communicates, and that the fashion and the aesthetics worn by Black people have become so popular is a good thing. That's pretty much a testament to how creative and irresistible the culture is. I personally believe in sharing your culture with others. That's how things naturally should work in an ideal world. People borrowing from each other and being inspired and building on interesting ideas. But as you know, things don't always work that way. They aren't always so perfect. And that's what we need to realize. There's a difference between culture spreading more naturally or organically because people are genuinely connecting with it, versus a culture becoming a tool used for maximum profit, while the people that it's coming from barely see any of those returns. That's very much just capitalism doing what capitalism does. And I think the entertainment industry especially has gotten way too comfortable and way too good at doing the latter. But I also can't just say every non-Black person who likes Black culture is part of this problem, or that every K-pop group is acting in bad faith, because we shouldn't have to gatekeep art and culture like that. But we also can't deny that there's been a lot of mishandling and harm because of this pattern. The system that's allowing people like Jack Harlow or Ariana Grande to build their career using Black culture, but then also have that ability to pivot away if they please, is what's harmful, because they're competing in the same market as Black artists are for the same listeners and the same deals and the same cultural real estate. And a lot of the time, they end up winning. And I don't think it's because they're actually more talented. It's because they carry the credibility of the culture without the social weight of actually being Black. The industry has structured things so that a watered down non-Black version of Blackness is often more profitable than the real thing. It's become an easier sell, and this contributes to Black erasure. So when a culture starts to become separated from the people it came from, anyone is able to become the face of it, kind of like we saw with Elvis. His success displaced Black artists from the mainstream of their own genre, and to this day, gaining visibility is such a struggle. So both things can be true at the same time. Jack Harlow might like Black music, but he also gets to treat Blackness like it's a lane that he can choose at a whim. And that's just not the same experience Black artists are having. And hopefully we can hold that nuance without the critique being softened. And the good thing, or, you know, the silver lining, is that Despite everything that's ever happened to Black culture, it's still here. People have tried to steal it, they try to erase it, repackage it, claim it as their own, and it still ends up surviving because you can try to take the sound, but you can't take what made that sound. Black people will just make something new, and you see us do that all the time. We'll make a new genre, a new trend, new lingo, and of course the cycle still happens, but that creativity, the ability to keep making something out of nothing, that can't be commodified. But I will say that survival is not the same thing as justice, so there's still a cost to all of this. Watching AAVE become a trend amongst Gen Z to the point that people just call it Gen Z lingo, yeah, that sucks. And there's a cost to watching your music make someone else a billionaire while your community is still fighting for equitable deals themselves. The industry has become very comfy profiting off of Black culture, and as you would expect, it's very slow to actually protect the Black people within it. Bell Hooks wrote her essay Eating the Other in 1992, so that's been over 30 years, and she was already asking what it means when a culture gets consumed by people who desire it but don't actually respect where it came from. And she was really onto something with her framing, because desire and respect are not the same thing. You can love something as much as you want to, and you can still end up treating it as disposable. You can build your entire career on R&B and Black culture and still not know a famous Brandy song. You can even try to include a Black woman in your group and still not protect her. You can say Black music is the base to your whole genre and still stay silent when Black people ask you to treat them with some respect. And that's the thing about this whole phenomenon. It doesn't necessarily run on hatred, but it is running on our endless need to consume. And that endless need to consume is only getting worse, and I blame capitalism. The thing with the need to consume is that if you were just carelessly consuming things without any accountability, then you're just taking. You're taking things with no care about where it came from, how it might harm a community or a certain group of people. So I don't think this video is necessarily a solution to the problem, because I don't think there is an easy solution, since it's very nuanced and people are profiting off of this. And once money gets into it, it's very hard to see any change. But I do think visibility and talking about it definitely helps. I really do love how much quicker we are to ask for accountability when things like this happen. Like Jack Harlow, his thing is ruined. Like that album, that press tour, it's ruined. I think I even read that it's projected to do worse than his last album release. So, I mean, I'm not celebrating his downfall, but it's just like, you know, actions have consequences. But that's all I have for you guys. I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm curious how you all see this pattern play out. Feel free to drop that in the comments. I definitely do read and see all of your comments. And if you made it this far in the video, thank you so much, first and foremost. But also, we like putting emojis in the comments if you made it this far. So if you made it this far in the video, please comment the thunderbolt emoji. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next video.